Your next car does not need a new tax to become more expensive. Your next flight does not need higher fuel prices to cost more. And your next phone, fridge, power bill, or defense budget does not need a headline crisis to quietly get heavier. A powder, a magnet, a coating, a shipment approval sitting on somebody else's desk. That is the strange part about rare earths. They are not famous like oil, they are not visible like steel. But when they are delayed, the factory asks a colder question. Can we build the product without it? And if the answer is no, the money clock starts running. China's rare earth export curbs are often described as geopolitics. But this video is about money. China is not directly taxing factories. But export controls can behave like a hidden factory tax. Factories are forced to pay for delay, uncertainty, replacement supply, extra inventory, redesigns, and lost output. That is the mechanism. A small input becomes a large financial pressure because modern factories are built around what must arrive on time. Rare earths help make magnets used in motors, electronics, defense systems, clean energy hardware, automation, and aerospace equipment. The rare earth itself may be a small line item, but the thing waiting for it may be a car, a jet engine, a semiconductor tool, a wind turbine, or a guided defense system. That is where the story stops being about minerals and starts being about money. Reuters reported that rare earth exports to the U.S. had improved, but China was still slow to approve some shipments. U.S. officials sometimes had to intervene for affected companies. That is not a full stop. It is a permission system. And permission systems are expensive because factories hate uncertainty. So the factory pays before the product even ships. Emergency buying, larger inventories, supplier premiums, legal checks, sometimes revenue that never arrives. This hidden factory tax is not collected at checkout. It is collected in friction. Now look at why China has so much leverage here. USGS estimated global rare earth mine production at about 390,000 tons in 2025. China produced about 270,000 tons of that, so China was roughly two-thirds of global mine production. But mining is only the first door. The bigger control point is processing. The UK government's critical mineral strategy says China controls about 70% of rare earth mining and about 90% of rare earth refining. The European Commission says 100% of the rare earths used for permanent magnets in the EU are refined in China. Factories need usable industrial inputs, oxides, alloys, magnets, coatings. Every step costs money, and every year of delay keeps the hidden tax alive. Now here is the financial impact most people miss. USGS estimated U.S. rare earth compound and metal imports at about $165 million in 2025. At first that sounds small, but that is the wrong number to stop at. USGS also said imported rare earths enter the country already embedded inside finished goods. So the rare earth bill is only the visible part. USGS said mineral-reliant industries such as aerospace, electronics, and construction represented about $4.09 trillion in value in the U.S. economy in 2025. Pause on that. The visible import bill is measured in millions. The exposed industrial system is measured in trillions. That is the scale mismatch. USGS showed the United States had 67% net import reliance for rare earth compounds and metals in 2025. In plain English, roughly two-thirds of America's rare earth compound and metal needs depended on imports. China supplied approx 70% of U.S. rare earth compound and metal imports during 2021 to 2024. So the sharper question is not, will the material become expensive? The sharper question is, what happens if a critical input does not arrive when the factory needs it? Reuters reported that one large affected company with defense and civilian businesses was losing hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue per month because it could not get export license approvals. The missing input may not be worth hundreds of millions, but the delayed output can be. That is the hidden factory tax, not the mineral bill, the blocked sale, the slowed production, the lost revenue. Now look at yttrium. Most people have never heard of it, but yttrium compounds help protect jet engines and turbines from extreme heat. Reuters reported that in March 2026, China approved a 60-ton shipment of yttrium oxide to the U.S. That one shipment was 50% larger than all yttrium shipped to the U.S. since China imposed export controls the previous April. Reuters also reported that yttrium oxide prices rose 6,900% in the 12 months to February. That number is the whole video. A tiny technical material can create a giant financial problem when there are few quick substitutes. A normal buyer asks, "What is the price?" A desperate factory asks, "Can I get it at all?" The first is procurement. The second is survival. When companies ask the second question, pricing power moves away from the factory and toward the bottleneck. Control the bottleneck, and you do not need to control the entire product. A magnet is not a car. But without the right magnet, the car may not leave the factory. That is why the cost does not stay small. It travels from supplier to component maker, then manufacturer, then customer, taxpayer, investor, or worker. Sometimes it becomes a higher final price. Sometimes it becomes lower profit. Sometimes it becomes government support. Sometimes it becomes a delayed delivery. The first payer is not always the final payer. This is also why governments start spending real money. The Pentagon-backed MP Materials deal included a $400 million preferred stock purchase by the U.S. Department of Defense, a $150 million loan, and a 10-year price floor of $110 per kilogram for neodymium praseodymium oxide. The U.S. International Development Finance Corporation also signed a $565 million loan for Serra Verde's rare earth mine in Brazil. Money is already moving because countries do not want one supply chain to control critical factory inputs. But the U.S. is not the only one paying this tax. Across the Atlantic, the dependency is even more direct. Reuters reported that exports of yttrium, dysprosium, and terbium were still down about 50% since China imposed the April 2025 controls compared with the previous 12 months. Japan had received only 4% of its previous dysprosium imports. Germany had received none. That matters because Japan and Germany are advanced industrial powers. But advanced manufacturing does not remove bottleneck risk. The more specialized the product, the more specific the input. The harder it is to replace, the more pricing power moves toward the bottleneck. The UK is reacting in the same direction. The UK Critical Mineral Strategy says China controls about 70% of rare earth mining and 90% of rare earth refining. The old model had one silent assumption: the critical input would always be available when needed. Once that assumption breaks, every finance model changes. Inventory becomes insurance. Alternative suppliers become resilience. Government support becomes industrial policy. A cheaper supply chain is no longer automatically better, because cheap plus fragile can become expensive very quickly. So when rare earth flows become uncertain, the financial impact is not limited to mining companies. It touches capital spending, manufacturing plans, government budgets, consumer prices, industrial policy, and corporate margins. Suppliers can charge more when alternatives are limited. Governments subsidize domestic supply because defense, energy, and technology supply chains are politically sensitive. Customers often meet the cost only at the end, not as a rare earth surcharge, but as a higher price, a delayed product, or a public bill. That is how hidden taxes work. They do not announce themselves, they travel through other people's invoices. A full ban may be easier to understand than a licensing regime. A ban says no. A license says maybe. For a factory, maybe is a financial problem. The licensing system does not need to block everything. It only needs to make the next shipment uncertain enough that factories spend money protecting themselves. That protection cost is the tax, and it can stay in the system even when shipments improve, because trust does not recover at the same speed as cargo. The correct way to read the story is not, China blocked rare earths, so everything stops. That is too simple. The better reading is, China controls a bottleneck, and bottlenecks can reprice entire systems. Modern money does not only move through banks, it moves through whatever the economy cannot function without. And rare earths are one of those quiet channels. The strange lesson is that the most powerful financial pressure does not always come from the largest cost. Sometimes it comes from the smallest part that cannot be replaced quickly. That is why the hidden factory tax is so dangerous. It attacks the calendar. And in manufacturing, the calendar is money. Every delayed day has a cost. Every backup plan has a cost. Every emergency shipment has a cost. Every substitute material has a cost. Every government intervention has a cost. The smart question is not whether rare earths are rare. The smart question is, which small input has the power to reprice the biggest part of the economy? Because once you find that input, you find the hidden tax. And in this case, that tax is already moving through factories before most people even know what they are paying for. China's rare earth curbs do not have to stop the world to change the bill. They only have to make the world pay more to keep moving,